Elias Pettersson has had most of our attention when thinking about a big trade with the Vancouver Canucks, but what about JT Miller? Sounds like he's the one more likely to get dealt. So, is he an idea for the Sabres? There are pros and there are cons. We'll get to it coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and thanks for making this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast, your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That does include checking us out on our YouTube channel, where you can watch the show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. A lot to get to on today's show. It is a game day. I've got a bet of the day, a sneaky good bet that I love for tonight's game, as Lindy Ruff really skated the guys this morning at practice on a game day back-to-back. You never see that. So that's got me thinking about a certain bet for tonight's game that I'll get to a little bit later on in today's show. But we are going to be talking trades today. JT Miller has been the subject of a lot of rumors in Vancouver. Every day that passes, every week, every month, it seems more and more likely that the reports of a rift between Vancouver Stars Elias Pettersson and JT Miller are real. They're true, because nobody's throwing cold water on it. You continue to see these guys' names popping up in trade discussions, and I have to believe that that means they're both on the market. And it might sound right now like Miller is the one that is more likely to be dealt. So today we'll get to JT Miller as a player, trade protection. I dug to find some sort of connection between him and the Sabres, anything, whether that's, where he played junior hockey, who he's played with in the past. So I've got some information on that coming up a little bit, and really what he's like off the ice, because that is the rumored rift between Miller and Pettersson. It has to do with what's gone on off the ice. And I think you could take it one of two ways: the way Miller is described and how you think that might mesh with the Sabres locker room, if you might even think it's exactly what the Sabres locker room could use. So interesting discussion on him coming up on today's episode. If you want to check us out on our Locked On Sabres text club, you could do that by hitting us up. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place to sign up. I'm on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports, or in Blue Sky at Sneaky Joe, where you can hit us up there as well. So before we get to any of that, yesterday afternoon, quickly, 6-4 Seattle over the Sabres. Just a forgettable, horrible game that nothing really stood out. I mean, other than they had 2 goals in this game where the Kraken scored within a minute in each of them. You had the 1-0 goal by Jack Quinn. Nice, good start. They've had a couple of those in recent days. Up 27 seconds later, former Sabre John Hayden scores his first goal of the season. And if you saw my thread on Twitter, you would already know this, but if not, you're probably going, who? Former Sabre? John Hayden? The most forgettable 55 games, I believe, of any Sabre ever, right? At least in my lifetime. Can you remember somebody that played more than 50 games on this team for this organization that fewer people knew existed than John Hayden? This was only 3 years ago, by the way, that he was on the team. I don't have a single memory, not a fight, not a goal, nothing for this guy. But he scored yesterday against the Sabres, so I guess revenge game for him. And then in the second period, Sabres fight back. They're down 3-1. Zucker scores in the power play again. He's got 16 on the year. He's like the one lone good story of the year. And then, hey, Tage Thompson scores his 20th. He's been good. And bam, it's 3-3. Sweet, let's enjoy the 56 seconds later, Alexiak, goal. And the Sabres never got back to a tie. And they lose the game 6-4. So Seattle. They're now 1-7 against the Kraken, a team that didn't exist 3 years ago. They are now 1-7 against. Awesome. It's been a lot of fun having them in the NHL. So not very optimistic about their chances tonight. One other thing about the game that I want to get to is yesterday I was real excited about Devin Levi getting called up, and that was short-lived. 5 goals, and he's out. Down to Rochester. He might still be on the trip, but at least it was a paper transaction that he was sent to Rochester. And he was not the reason why they gave up 5, but he certainly didn't help them much. He scrambled around a lot, I thought, in the first and second period. I thought he settled in the third and made some incredible saves, but he only gave them 1 good period, in my opinion. And, my hypothetical on him was, what would they do with him if he had a couple of great games in a row? And he didn't. He didn't get off the ground on that. So he goes to Rochester, and I think that's where he should dominate from here to the rest of the year, and we cross our fingers that he's ready to take a big step next year. It's my current attitude on Devin Levi. Luukkonen should be ready to go tonight. So tonight's opponent, Vancouver. Let's get to what is going on with them and all this trade chatter. We've done a couple of shows about Elias Pettersson, and he is still, to me, the better idea for the Buffalo Sabres in a trade and the more likely idea for the Buffalo Sabres in a trade. And it is worth noting there has been really no more trade chatter about him in recent days. There was a report about the Islanders being interested and that they were taking calls from Western Conference teams. This was a couple of weeks ago, and that's really it. There hasn't been much since. It's the attention has turned more to JT Miller, and those two have been the two that have been reported to be at each other's throats, maybe, if you want to put it that way, or more so that it kind of sounds more like Miller called out Pettersson or has kind of been after him about having a down year, and it's Miller that's kind of the aggressor in this relationship, and that's kind of caused the situation that you've had. So the reason, though, why I think it's more likely Pettersson is no trade protection until this summer, and Miller has a full no movement clause. And I almost wanted to save that until the end of today's episode to kind of, let's get out what this would be as a cool idea and not have to think about no trade clauses immediately. But listen, we'll play the game. We'll play the game. Maybe there's a relationship between Miller and somebody in the Sabre organization that I don't know about. Maybe he's the type of character that is wanting to take over a locker room and doesn't feel like Vancouver's willing to give him that because they have another young star. And maybe the Sabres would say, you want to come here and take over this locker room? You'll do it. We'll pay you, and we'll give you first line minutes, and you can be the guy. If you want to go after these guys, we'll let you. We'll let you take it over. So that's, my best way of arguing that he could maybe waive it to come here. Again, I know it's a tough sell. He is from Ohio. He played in Pennsylvania, junior hockey. So I don't know. Can you sell him on playing closer to home? Whatever. Do your work to get to, maybe the agent and someone's got a relationship. But the important things to note here about on-ice production, before we get to I think the more interesting part about Miller and the Sabres is the off-ice conversation and whether you think he's the right fit. Because I got a very interesting piece of Shayna from The Athletic, her story about Miller, I thought was really interesting to put in the context of the Sabres. But before we do that, on ice, 32 years old, $8 million per year is the cap hit. Not bad. 5 years remaining on the contract. He has put up some big numbers in his career. Most recently, the last season, 103 points for Vancouver last year. He was an all-star last season, the first selection of his career. That was off, by the way, an 82-point season before that and a 99-point season before that. So he's had 3 years in a row with a lot of points, 30-plus goals in all 3 of those seasons. This year, a little bit more of a down year, under a point per game, 31 points in 35 games. And that is obviously under an 82-point pace. Some of his goals above replacement numbers over at Evolving Hockey look good offensively, bad defensively. mean, we are talking 15th percentile defensively. You can't find him above the 25th percentile defensively since 2017-18. Like, he has been a down defensive player for a few years. Early in his career, he was great two ways, but it is not really the case anymore. He's more inconsistent on that front, but he gives you points. He gives you offense. He's a little more in the mold of, I don't want to quite call him a power forward because he's not enormous. He's 6'1", 220. But I see a more physical player than a lot of guys you have on this Sabres team right now, and I think he's the right type of forward that the Sabres need in their top six and, more importantly, on their top line. So I like the player. He's having a down year. He's at an age where you have to wonder about maybe never getting back to 190-plus point performances. But on this team, I think in first-line minutes, you put him with Tage Thompson. Maybe you want to put Miller at center. I think you would have the right environment for him to put up points. That doesn't mean they'd win, right? But I think you'd have the right environment for him to continue to put up offense into the final 5 years of his contract here. When we come back, I want to get to the off-ice conversation with Miller, the type of leader he's described as, and whether that meshes with the Sabres, and also what the package would have to be, because you'd have to outbid a lot of teams that would probably be interested in JT Miller. That's when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's the best, how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cup. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers, over 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less. It's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. It's a game day for the Buffalo Sabres. Sabres after dark, 10 o'clock puck drop against Vancouver. And we are talking about one of their best players, one of their leaders, and one of their highest, point total guys really in the league, you could say, for the last 6 years that he's been a Canuck. Miller, before that, 2 seasons in Tampa Bay. He never really got rolling in Tampa. Not in terms of production value. He kind of played in the bottom 6 a little bit, and that's part of the reason I think they moved off of him, because he had a big contract that he was going to need, and Vancouver wanted to put him in the top 6. I mean, he played 1440 a night in his one full season with the Lightning. He's averaged 20 minutes and 13 seconds with Vancouver, so 6 minutes more per night, 5.5 minutes more per night on Vancouver versus when he was in Tampa. He never won the Cup. If you're wondering, Stanley Cup winning experience, JT Miller, Sabres could use that. Never won the Cup. In fact, the Lightning traded him and then won the Cup 2 years in a row immediately after. You could, I wouldn't say the two necessarily are correlated, but who knows? Here's the interesting conversation about Miller to me. I was reading about JT Miller from Shayna Goldman, who covers the NHL for The Athletic, one of the better hockey writers out there. She does Sabres Live a lot on WGR and MSG, and she used to cover the Rangers, and she wrote about Miller today and included 6 trade locations for him, none of which were the Sabres, by the way. No surprise there. I want to take one blurb, though, from her piece and put it into context with the Sabres. And you tell me, the listeners, and if you want to do it by text or Twitter or whatever you want to do, I think this is a good question, whether this is the right type of leader that this Sabres group needs right now, if you include that he's a good player. Because what have I been advocating for, I don't know how long, maybe since this past calendar year? The thing that I've been advocating for with this hockey team is a guy that is going to set the culture, is going to be a leader, and one of your best players at the same time. Whenever the Sabres have brought in this outside leadership during this playoff drought, the guy's never been good. Kyle Okposo tried to be the leader of this team, right? Quote, dad for this team for multiple seasons, but he was on the fourth line playing 10 minutes a night. That you can lead in the locker room, but it doesn't hit the same when you don't also lead by example on the ice. Josh Georges was a leader on this team that I think Eichel finally said, this dude can't be a leader of this team. He stinks and he's dragging us down. Georges was trying to be a leader on this team, but he was terrible. And there have been, when Craig Rivet was brought in and the Sabres players voted him the captain before he had ever stepped foot on the ice for this hockey team, he was not the player he was in Montreal. He was still fine, but he wasn't a top pair defenseman. When's the last time the Sabres brought in a true leader to set the culture that was great? And the answer is Chris Drury. And I got a question last week from a texter. Hey, what's the one thing that past Sabre playoff teams had that you think this Sabre team needs the most? And my answer was Drury, a guy like that who walked in and said, where are the pictures of the Stanley Cup that set the culture, that worked? I mean, Tim Connolly said he didn't know what working hard was like in the NHL. It really, until Drury showed up and guys would follow him. And I'm not saying JT Miller is Chris Drury. I'm just searching for any version of that. And it's not easy to find. Maybe Miller is that. But again, this is the blurb from Shayna's piece. You tell me if you think he's Drury in this way or if it's something completely different. Here's the quote from her piece at The Athletic, which you can read in full. It's a really good breakdown. Quote, having covered Miller closely for 6 seasons, which includes writing on the double-edged sword of his fiery, old-school leadership style, the best way to sum up his off-ice impact is he amplifies the team's current emotional state. When the club is winning, Miller's swagger, passionate energy, and off-ice lightheartedness, he's a huge chirper, can take a team to the next level. When the club is losing, Miller can be frustrated, charged up, and on edge. He's blunt and unafraid to speak his mind, which has ruffled some feathers in Vancouver. End quote. Those 3 paragraphs are really interesting because I got one part of that makes me think, ooh, terrible idea for the Sabres, and another that go, oh, that actually sounds about maybe what they need. The first part that doesn't sound great, if Shayna is accurate, quote, he amplifies the team's current emotional state. That's very bad. That would be a very bad thing. I mean, this team right now here in Buffalo, their emotional state has to be as bad as it gets, right? It is negative. It's negative. I can't imagine there's a ton of belief in that locker room right now. The dark cloud in KeyBank Center that Robin Leonard once described has never been bigger. So if Miller's going to amplify that, that's horrendous. That's a horrendous idea. But on the other hand, hearing when the club is losing, Miller can be frustrated, charged up, and on edge. He's blunt and unafraid to speak his mind. That sounds like the exact thing that Sabre fans will text me or tweet me about what they need. So I guess I don't know. I might want to take the risk. If there are roadblocks, and the number one roadblock that is 1,000 feet high is, would he be willing to waive his no movement clause to come to Buffalo? And I know the answer is probably no, but let's play the hypothetical. If the answer was yes, and you did figure out a trade package, would you say no to him because of that? And I don't think I would. I think I would say, you know what? Sure, it could go horribly wrong, but everything's already going horribly wrong. What's the risk? Take the risk. Buy a lottery ticket. Maybe he'll come in and the rest of the team will react well to him. And maybe it'll be exactly what they need. He's a great player. Hearing it from a great player, maybe that hits different. So in terms of his off-ice leadership, sure, it might right now be getting him thrown out of Vancouver because they have a young superstar that they kind of need to be the alpha. I think. Like they probably want Pettersson to be the top dog on that team. And if the guy that's really good, but maybe not as important, is kind of, hitting him over the head when he's not playing well, like maybe that's not a great environment for him. Here, I guess I just wouldn't care about it. I would say, fine, whatever. Let's see how it happens. Maybe Tage Thompson, if Miller went at Thompson the same way he's gone at Pettersson, maybe Thompson would take it better. Again, maybe not, but I don't know. I would like to see it. Let me see it tested. So for that, I kind of like this. I kind of like this idea. He is not the right age. The contract isn't great. And this season hasn't instilled a lot of confidence in me from him. But I'm going to take the last 3 years to heart that he's a great player. He's got a lot of talent. And I kind of want to see what that chemical balance would be like if you put a player that good with those type of leadership qualities, even if it could cause a spark and it could explode. I'd like to see what it would look like. So for that, I'm into Miller as an idea. Now, what would the trade package be if you can get him to want to come here? Well, you're going to be bidding other teams, and I'll tell you what I think it would take. And you could tell me if you wouldn't do it. I think I would, but there's not much I wouldn't do for this team right now. I'm at a point with them where just like anything sounds good. Fine, whatever. You want to trade this, and this? Do it. I don't even care. JJ Peterka, Noah Ostlund, and a protected first-round pick. That's what I got as a mock trade. It sounds like what they want is a mix of, because they're not rebuilding in Vancouver, they want a mix of young NHLers, prospects, and picks. So I'm going to give you one of each. I'm going to give you a good, top 6 winger that hasn't quite hit his stride yet in JJ Peterka. I'm going to give you a first-round prospect, but not my best first-round prospect, in Noah Ostlund. And I'll give you my first, but I am protecting it. I am not giving you the first overall pick. Top 10 protected, whatever you want to do. That would be my offer. And I bet that would be hard to top. And Peterka would be the biggest reason for that. And that's the risk you'd be taking. You'd be trading away a young player in Peterka, but you'd be doing it for an experienced veteran who's played almost 100 games in the postseason that would be a leader off the ice, maybe the right kind of leader, maybe not. And you could put him right in the top line. He could play center. He could play wing. He's really versatile in that way. So JT Miller, I would say the offer would have to be to get him at least Peterka, Ostlund, and a first-round pick. When we come back, we'll talk about this matchup. Sabres and Canucks. Miller will be playing, I think. And UPL will be in goal. I've got a bet I love for tonight's game. Get to that when we return here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. My bet for tonight is from FanDuel. So stick around for that. Well, I'll give you a hint. It's a period prop, a third period prop for tonight's game, and that's available at FanDuel. If you want to bet just something in the second period, anything. I mean, if you've got plans tonight and you are going to miss the first period and you're going to miss the third period, or actually think of it the other way. If it's 10 o'clock puck drop, you want to go to bed by midnight, but you want to have some action on the game. You want to know whether you won or not before you go to bed. You could bet a first period prop. Bet the Sabres just in the first period to win the first. That's available to you. You could bet a player prop in the first period. For example, Tage Thompson to score in the first period is plus 750. You want to do that? That's available to you if you think you're only going to watch the first. Not just hockey. Of course, the NFL playoffs are into the conference championship, and FanDuel makes the playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with that $300 in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres After Dark, 10 o'clock against Vancouver. I am not loving their odds of winning tonight. Vancouver is not a great team. That's why they have so much turmoil this year. The results are not going in their favor. But they're much better than the Sabres are. The Sabres 6 points back of anybody else in the Eastern Conference. They are in last in the East, and they are 6 back of the Islanders for second last at 39 points in 46 games. Vancouver, 50 points in 45 games. That's a 5.56 points percentage. They are 1 point back of Calgary for that final playoff spot in the West. They've only won 3 of 10. They've not played well lately. They're a minus 14 goal differential on the season. And if you look at their numbers on the year, their guys are having down years. Pettersson's having a down year. Miller, as previously mentioned, is having a down year. Brock Besser, goal-wise, is having an up year, but he's not really giving you anything in terms of assists right now. Quinn Hughes has been great. Quinn Hughes is one of the best defensemen in hockey, and he continues to be just that. 25 minutes a night, 50 points in 41 games. Quinn Hughes is electric. He's such a good skater, such a great stick handler. I think he's the second most fun defenseman to watch in hockey. Cale Makar, number 1. Quinn Hughes, number 2. For this game, Luukkonen in goal for the Buffalo Sabres. And let me double check at time of recording who is starting for Vancouver. And it is going to be Thatcher Demko, a guy that I really wanted the Sabres to trade for 2 years ago. He never got dealt. He stayed in Vancouver. He has had a down year, though. Last year, he remember when I wanted them to trade for him, it was a buy low. He was having a down year. He had dealt with some injuries. And then last year, up year. He bounced back. This year, back down. So he's been very up and down the last few seasons. This year, 10 games played, an .871 save percentage. One of the worst marks in the National Hockey League. So Demko tonight, very talented goaltender, but he has not had a great year. So a little susceptible there. The bet I love for the Sabres has to do with what they did at practice today. Now, line rushes at practice, same as the Seattle game. At time of when we recorded yesterday, we did not know that Yuri Kulik was going to be activated off IR. He was, and then was centering the top line. So Kulik right now centering Thompson and Zucker. Very interesting on that number 1 line. I think Lindy's trying to get 3 scoring lines out of this with Kulik, Zucker, Thompson, Cousins, Peterka, Tuck, and then Krebs, Benson, and Quinn. Didn't work great last night. I think, although they did score 4 goals, the bet tonight has to do with how Lindy treated practice this morning. Now, the Sabres are in a back-to-back out west. Typically, when you're going into the second day of a back-to-back and you played the day before, what teams often will do and what Lindy will often do is they'll just completely scrap the morning skate. They won't even have it. They'll cancel the morning skate and they won't even do like the light work. Just nobody goes on the ice. We're going to rest, and we'll be ready for tonight. Not only did Lindy Ruff not cancel the morning skate this morning, he had a real practice. Everyone on the ice, no taking it easy. They had a real practice. And then the takeaway, I think, is Lindy was not happy with their battle and their compete last night, so he's having them do it at practice. And on one level, I understand it. There's maybe even a frustration out of Lindy of, if you guys aren't going to work, I'm working you. Here you go. Have fun. I get it. Kind of holding them accountable. But what's the consequence of that going to be? The consequence is probably going to be the Sabres are going to run out of energy tonight. Now, maybe they're energized by this at the start and they're running on that adrenaline of the coach running them in the morning and they start out the game and they look like they're ready. Because they played yesterday and because they had a hard practice this morning, I can't believe it's going to last. I can't believe it's going to last. I think they're going to run out of juice, and it might happen fast. But it definitely, to me, will happen by the third period. So, my sneaky bet of the night, as mentioned on FanDuel, you could bet by the period. I'm going over 1.5 goals for the Canucks in the third period. So, the Canucks to score 2 or more third period goals in the third. That's plus 174, which would be 10 to win 1740 or 100 to win 174. So that's my bet of the night. I love it. I think it has a lot to do with what Lindy did this morning. And I'm not really criticizing what Lindy did. I just think you're going to have a downside to doing that is the reason why teams don't do it. And I think you're going to see the reason tonight. The reason's going to be, the third period. And hopefully for the Sabres' sake, they can get out to a lead. They come out hot and they build a lead and they're able to sit on it in the third period. Another reason why I like this bet, though, is even if that happens, and the Sabres get out to a 2-goal lead going into the third when they run out of gas, they're known to blow those leads, right? Even if they have the lead, they very easily could lose it because we see them do that over and over and over again. So I think you have a lot of different avenues. Vancouver could be up by 1 and score in the third period, and they get an empty net goal. Like, there are so many different avenues, I think, to covering this bet. So plus 174, Canucks over a goal and a half in the third. Sabres After Dark, enjoy it. I'm going to be watching it bright and early tomorrow morning. Look through some of your texts in the morning as well. So that'll do it for us. If you want to hit up Joe Marino, Locked On Bills, check them out. They're going to start turning their attention to the Chiefs on Sunday in the AFC Championship. If you want some more hockey talk, Steal and Flip got you covered on Locked On Fantasy Hockey. And we'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.